Well, good morning again, everyone. This message will not be in Spanish, so still got to work on that. We'll see how that goes. We are going to be in Numbers, trying to get through Numbers 23 and 24. Learning a little bit about Balaam, and going to learn a little bit about God's promises and God's protection and how God uses people regardless of what they may be motivated by. A little bit about just God being there when sometimes we don't think he is. So here, motivation itself, it can come from different sources. It can be external or internal. There are people out there who are really great motivators. You got motivational speakers. You've got family members maybe that are really good at motivating. You've got pastors and coaches who find ways or just have a way or a knack of motivating people. I've had coaches in my life who knew how to push me in the right way to get me to perform the best that I could. I even worked with a coach side by side who actually made me a better coach. Just the way he pushed me and forced me in a lot of ways to learn to be a better coach. And it's good to have someone to do that, but you don't always have someone to motivate you to perform your best. That's why it's vital to have strong internal motivation. But the source of that motivation should come from a place of purity. Otherwise, it can leave us empty and defeated. That internal motivation needs to be something pure, something true. And here in Numbers, we're going to learn a little bit about Balaam and what motivates him. Now, he was a gifted prophet, there's no doubt. God was using him, God spoke to him. And this guy, he was summoned by Balak, and at first Balaam rejects him. But once Balak, shows him the money, he makes his way to Balak to try and see if he can deliver for him and get paid. So his motivation was a little bit different. So here in Numbers 23. Then Balaam said to Balak, "Build me 7 altars here and prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams for me." So Balak did as Balaam directed. And they offered a bull and a ram on each altar. I'm reading out of the CSB in case you're wondering. Balaam said to Balak, "Stay here by your burnt offering while I am gone. Maybe the Lord will meet with me, and I will tell you whatever he reveals to me." So he went to a barren hill. God met with him, and Balaam said to him, "I have arranged 7 altars and offered a bull and a ram on each altar." Then the Lord put a message in Balaam's mouth and said, "Return to Balak and say what I tell you." So he returned to Balak, who was standing there by his burnt offering with all the officials of Moab. So now here we have Balaam and Balak offering these sacrifices to God. But if you recall earlier in Numbers, and that these sacrifices were to be done by a priest on one altar. It was the calling of the priest to offer sacrifices to God. So what's this guy doing? Did Balaam think that by offering, 7 sacrifices on 7 altars, that he could convince God to do what he wanted? It's amazing how we can sometimes treat God like some kind of spiritual vending machine sometimes. We'll sit there and, look how I've been to church every week, Lord. I've been reading my Bible every day and twice on Sunday. Did you see my giving this month? Don't I deserve, fill in the blank, whatever it is? Motives. They can be so tricky and hard to discern because we and others might see the result from the outside easily. Like, those things in of themselves are good things. But why are you doing them? That's the most important thing, the why. That's most important. Why are you doing them? Are we serving, learning about God, spending time with his people because we love the Lord? Or out of some sense of obligation or fear or hope of reward or some kind of status or something, or just to maybe look good in front of people? Balaam was looking to be rewarded materialistically. We need to search our own hearts. Better yet, let God search and show you and me what our true motives are. The Lord did put a word in Balaam's mouth. Now, it might be surprising that God spoke to Balaam and gave him a message to speak. God obviously knows Balaam's heart and still gave him this gift. Here we learn that just because someone is spiritually gifted does not mean that they are spiritually mature or living a holy life. God spoke through a donkey in the previous chapter. He's about to do it again. Balaam returns to Balak and his officials, and I'm sure they were real excited to see what their money had bought them. Here we go, verse 7. Balaam proclaimed this poem. Balak brought me from Aram, the king of Moab, from the eastern mountains. Come, put a curse on Jacob for me. Come, denounce Israel. How can I curse someone God has not cursed? How can I denounce someone the Lord has not denounced? I see them from the top of the rocky cliffs, and I watch them from the hills. There is a people living alone. It does not consider itself among the nations. Who has counted the dust of Jacob, or numbered even 1/4 of Israel? Let me die the death of the upright. Let the end of my life be like theirs. So Balak learns here that God, the God of Israel, knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted Israel, or Jacob, cursed so they could be defeated. But guess what? Now Balaam or anyone else could curse Israel if God hadn't cursed them. Balak was wasting his time and money. Instead, God blesses Israel, making them one and blessing them with great size. Then Balaam concludes with a desire to die a righteous death. Now, there are many who want to die in a righteous way, perhaps defending the life of a loved one or dying the death of a martyr standing up for God. But a lot of those same people have no desire to live in a righteous way. Oh, I can say those words, I can watch that program or movie, follow that person on social media. That's not a big deal. Watch out, Christian. God is watching, and so are those who know you. They want to see if this God you proclaim is real or not. Like it or not, we are God's representatives right here in this fallen world. So don't be a stumbling block to someone who seeks the true God. Try and live that righteous life, and then perhaps God will reward you with that righteous death. Moving on, verse 11. What have you done to me, Balak asked. I brought you to curse my enemies, but look, you have only blessed them. And he answered, shouldn't I say exactly what the Lord puts in my mouth? So Balak is upset at what he hears come out of Balaam's mouth. He did pay good money for Israel to be cursed, but instead they're blessed. And maybe Balaam is disappointed himself too. Perhaps there's a little bit of sorrow in that response. I'm sure he wanted to deliver for his employer. After all, he was getting paid a good sum of money, and that was actually what motivated him to be there in the first place. Verse 13. Then Balak said to Balaam, please come with me to another place where you can see them. You will only see the outskirts of their camp. You won't see all of them. From there, put a curse on them for me. So Balak took him to Lookout Field on top of Pisgah. built 7 altars, and offered a bull or ram on each altar. Balaam said to Balak, "Stay here by your burnt offering while I seek the Lord over there." The Lord met with Balaam and put a message in his mouth. Then he said, "Return to Balak and say what I tell you." So he returned to Balak, who was standing there by his burnt offering with the officials of Moab. Balak asked him, "What did the Lord say?" Sounds like he's thinking he might get a different answer. Obviously, Balak here wasn't giving up so easy. So he asked Balaam to come to another spot. Maybe a change of perspective will produce the outcome he's looking for. Balaam might be able to curse Israel if he can only see a part of them and not all of them. Aren't we the very same way when we don't get what we want? God will give us an answer to our prayer, but we don't like it. So what do? We try and ask in a different way. We bring it up in a prayer group or something. Like God is going to be like, "Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. Sure, here you go. No problem." It's best if we just listen to the Lord's answer and rest. Be content in where he has us or what he wants us to do. On a personal level here, a long time ago, I used to stress over work. Mainly because I worked for the phone company, and the phone company's union, and I was very low on that totem pole. So anytime things happened and there was cuts made, it was always a threat to the low totem folks. It was all by seniority. So it used to be where it would just be a toll on the family and just worry and all that kind of thing. And eventually I got to a place where I just gave my career to the Lord. I just said, "God, there's nothing I can do. I am where I am. And if they cut me, they cut me. If they don't, they don't." And when I did that years ago, it's amazing just how I survived cut after cut after cut. And God has moved me across the country to keep working. So recently we've had more of these cuts, and it's been a little bit more difficult because I'm not in a union shop anymore. It's different. But still, God has moved me. He's protected me. He's provided. And, just through it all, it's been a remarkable journey. But at the same time, whenever there's been either a cut coming or an opportunity for maybe a promotion or a lateral move of some kind, I'll do my part. I'll prepare for the interview or and correctly fill out the application. But at the end of the day, I say, "Lord, whatever it is you want from me. If you want me to have the promotion, I'll have it. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to do my part. I'm going to do my interview, do the best I can, and then let it be. It's up to you. It's not up to me. If you want me to be there, I'll be there. If not, I'll stay where I'm at and do what I can here." And, it's been such a relief, over the years. Verse 18. Balaam proclaimed this poem, or his poem. "Balak, get up and listen, son of Zippor. Pay attention to what I say. God is not a man that he might lie, or a son of man that he might change his mind. Does he speak and not act, or promise and not fulfill? I have indeed received a command to bless. Since he has blessed, I cannot change it. He considers no disaster for Jacob. He sees no trouble for Israel, or he does not observe sin in Jacob. He does not see wrongdoing in Israel. The Lord their God is with them, and there is rejoicing over the king among them. God brought them out of Egypt. He is like the horns of a wild ox for them. There is no magic curse against Jacob and no divination against Israel. It will now be said about Jacob and Israel, what great things God has done. And people rise up, people rise up like a lioness. They rouse themselves like a lion. They will not lie down until they devour the prey and drink the blood of the slain. So now here, God is rebuking Balak directly and teaching him a little bit about the nature of God, of the God of Israel. Now, verse 19 is one you may want to highlight, underline, and memorize. Everything in this book is for us, literally words to live by. As much as it seemed like Israel was trying to break God's promise to Abraham, God still delivered. God kept his promise to them and will keep his promises to you. Even when it feels like you have screwed it up and God's tossed you aside, remember how much he loves you. It's right here in his book. Read it for yourself so you can believe it. Verse 21, a little bit of a hint is dropped on how Israel can be cursed. And we'll see that later on, how it manifests itself. Verse 25, then Balak told Balaam, don't curse them and don't bless them. But Balaam answered, didn't I tell you whatever the Lord says I must do? So Balak is really frustrated now and basically says, dude, shut up. And Balaam gives him an I told you so. But Balak isn't done trying yet. Here we go. Verse 27. Again, Balak said to Balaam, please come. I will take you to another place. Maybe it will be agreeable to God that you can put a curse on them for me there. So Balak took Balaam to the top of Peor, which overlooks the wasteland. Balak told Balaam, build me 7 altars here and prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams for me. So Balak did as Balaam said and offered a bull and a ram on each altar. Numbers 24, verse 1. Since Balaam saw that it pleased the Lord to bless Israel, he did not go and seek omens or use sorcery, as on previous occasions, but turned toward the wilderness. When Balaam looked up and saw Israel encamped tribe by tribe, the Spirit of God came upon him. Here we go again. Now they're up to 21 bulls, 21 rams sacrificed, plus whatever Balaam was to be paid to curse Israel. Balak has now invested lots of money, livestock, and time to this point. Remember, they had to walk to all these places. They didn't have trucks to load everything up on and drive so they could move around. They had to walk everywhere, along with all the livestock that he took. And this time, Balaam does something a little different. It says here he did not seek omens or he didn't seek to use sorcery. So he was really trying to curse Israel before and using whatever means he could. This time, he just simply lets the Lord speak to him. He looked out and saw how Israel was camped. And I don't know if you know this, and I think there's an illustration on the little paper there we have on the tables. But the way that Israel was encamped around the tabernacle, it took the shape of a cross. So if you could see somehow, do a flyover over the camp, you would see a cross. And Balaam saw this, and the Spirit of God just came upon him. Oh, that we would do this and just look upon the cross and listen. If we would only stop and quiet our minds and just let the Lord speak to us. So simple, but not easy to do. We have so many distractions in our lives, just tons of things, of course, work, family, young folks, you guys got school, the folks that take care of the kids, we got to get them to school. It's just so many things in our lives that just take over our minds, and we can get so easily distracted. But if you can just do it, if we could just quiet our minds for a few moments and let the Lord just speak to us. And, how blessed we could be to hear from God, to hear from the Lord, and hear what he has to say. Verse 3, 24, verse 3. And he proclaimed this poem: the oracle of Balaam, son of Beor, the oracle of the man whose eyes are opened, the oracle of one who hears the sayings of God, who sees a vision of the Almighty, from the Almighty, who falls into a trance with his eyes uncovered. How beautiful are your tents, Jacob, your dwellings, Israel. They reach out like river valleys, like gardens beside a stream, like aloes the Lord has planted, like cedars beside the water. Water will flow from his buckets, and his seed will be by abundant water. His king will be greater than Agag, and his kingdom will be exalted. God brought him out of Egypt. He is like the horns of a wild ox for them. He will feed on the enemy nations and gnaw their bones. He will strike them with his arrows. He crouches, he lies down like a lion or lioness. Who dares to rouse him? Those who bless you will be blessed, and those who cursed you will be cursed. So the Lord here is pronouncing blessing and abundance and Israel's dominance over other nations that God will give them. There's also a message that other nations should heed. Those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who cursed Israel will be cursed. That's why it's so important that we as a nation do not turn our backs on the nation of Israel. God keeps his promises. We have to remember that. Verse 10. Then Balak became furious with Balaam, struck his hands together, and said to him, I summoned you to put a curse on my enemies, but instead you have blessed them these 3 times. Now go to your home. I said I would reward you richly, but look, the Lord has denied you a reward. Balaam answered Balak, didn't I previously tell the messengers that you sent me, if Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go against the Lord's command to do anything good or bad of my own will. I will say whatever the Lord says. Now I'm going back to my people, but first let me warn you what these people will do to your people in the future. So now Balak is really angry. He says, I was going to make you a rich and powerful man if you did what I asked, but instead you've done the opposite. I'll bet this hurt Balaam to hear because that was the motive of his heart. He coveted money and power. What do you covet? The answer can be hard to figure out and define because what we covet may seem like a good thing sometimes. But what is the cost of it? What are you sacrificing for it? Is it worth it in the grand scheme of things? Is it worth it in God's economy? It's so easy to let things that may seem to be good, they might even be good things, but what is the sacrifice? Is it costing you your relationship with God? Is it costing you your relationship with your family? Those things you need to keep in mind. Balaam here gives another I told you so. Perhaps he's trying to shift the blame on God for failing to curse Israel. Maybe here in this moment, Balaam realizes that he should have just listened to God in the first place and stayed home and not gone with Balak's messengers. The whole trip was just a big waste. So now Balaam, he's going to give Balak a freebie, so to speak, and lets him know just how blessed Israel will be. Verse 15. Then he proclaimed his poem, the oracle of Balaam, son of Beor, the oracle of the man whose eyes are open, the oracle of the one who hears the sayings of God and has knowledge from the Most High, who sees a vision from the Almighty, who falls into his trance with his eyes uncovered. I see him, but not now. I perceive him, but not near. A star will come from Jacob, and a scepter will arise from Israel. He will smash the forehead of Moab and strike down all the Shethites. Edom will become a possession. Seir will become a possession of its enemies, but Israel will be triumphant. One who comes from Jacob will rule. He will destroy the city's survivors. Then Balaam saw Amalek and proclaimed his poem. Amalek was first among the nations, but his future is destruction. Next he saw the Kenites and proclaimed his poem. Your dwelling place is enduring, your nest is set in the cliffs. Cain will be destroyed when Asher takes you captive. Once more he proclaimed his poem. Ah, who can live when God does this? Ships will come from the coast of Kittim. They will carry out raids against Asher and Eber, but they too will come to destruction. Again, we see Balaam was a gifted prophet. God used him here to deliver a prophecy about Jesus. You may have recognized some of the references. He sees him, but not now. He is called a star and a scepter. He's glorious like a star and has all authority to rule, a scepter. Jesus will eventually rule over all nations. And right here, God speaks of these nations that neighboring Israel and their future. Verse 25, Balaam then arose and went back to his homeland, and Balak also went his way. Now these two go home disappointed and perhaps angry. Neither got what they wanted, no victory for Balak over Israel, and no money and power for Balaam. Something to think about here. Balak was aware of where Israel's strength was. He didn't try military strategy or new weapons to defeat them. This pagan man knew that the battle was spiritual. And if he could win that battle, he could win the military battle. We need to have that same awareness. We need to give more time and attention to building our spiritual strength by walking close with Jesus. We can't let this pagan guy be more aware about spiritual things than we are. Something else I'd like to point out. Israel was completely unaware of what was going on here. They were being spiritually attacked, but God protected them. They were traveling through the desert wilderness. It's hot, water is scarce, they're miserable. They felt abandoned by God several times during their journey. They've rebelled against him. Yet God is right there protecting them from an attack they have no clue is coming. Now, I'm sure we've all been in that wilderness, that desert of pain and suffering, heartache, defeat, where we feel like we're alone. You feel like God has abandoned you, and you just can't take anymore. What we don't know is that God is right there, protecting us from further attack. We may not know until we're in heaven when those times took place. But God was right there answering your prayer when you looked up and said, God, where are you? I can't take anymore. He was there, preventing the enemy from attacking you again, delivering you in ways you could not perceive. And maybe in that moment, you turned your back on God. Just know he has not and will not turn his back on you. He's waiting with his arms wide open toward you, longing for you to turn towards him and run into them. As I call up the worship team, I want to pray. The worship team would go ahead, come on up. If you're hurting, if you've rebelled, if you've never called Jesus Lord, I I want to lift you up in prayer. There are so many times and so many things where we feel like we just can't take anymore. We just can't take anymore. And we're looking to the heavens and wondering, God, where are you? And maybe we think, he's done with me. Or we get angry and we say, I am done with you. Just know that God does not give up on you. He loves you. And he's just waiting. So, Lord, right now I just lift up anyone here who maybe is just at that point, that breaking point. Maybe they've dropped to their knees and they're looked up in the heavens and been like, God, where are you? Or they've lifted their fist and shaken their fist at you and said, God, I don't need you. Or I'm done with you. For those, Lord, I just pray that you touch them. Lord, touch their hearts. Bring them a word of encouragement. Lord, bring them some relief. Show them that you're right there next to them, protecting them from attacks they don't even see. And for those, Lord, who have never accepted you, they've never come to you, they've never known you, Lord, make yourself known to them. Make yourself real to them. Touch their hearts, Lord. Give them the faith they need to believe in you. And bring them into your arms. Because I know, Lord, that you just want to embrace them and hold them tight and just love on them. In Jesus' name I pray. If you need prayer, Rob, myself, Daniel are here for you. Whatever it might be, if you've never accepted God, you've never accepted Jesus as your Savior, please do not leave here today without knowing who He is. Today is the day of salvation. And just if you need prayer, please come to one of us or really anyone here and just get prayed over. Have a great week. God bless you guys.